I was married to my wife for 17 years, and never once had she turned to me and told me she loved me. For 10 of the 17 years, the marriage had been sexless. This wasn't on the part of my wife. She always had a high libido, whereas mine has always been low. I guess we just wanted different things when it came to sex. She wanted wild and dangerous sex, while all I wanted was passionate lovemaking between two people who loved each other. To be fair, we were two very different people when we met. They say opposites attract, and at the time I felt lucky to have found her. She worked as a psychologist and taught at a very prestigious university. I owned a small building company, and we met when I was contracted to do work in the building where she taught. The marriage wasn't always bad. At the start, she was amazing and tried hard to make it work, but it didn't take long for the differences between us to become a barrier. The last 3 years have been the hardest. The constant arguing meant we no longer shared a bed together. Whenever we do manage to be in the room together, the air is thick with a tension that is pressed down on every breath, filling the room with an unspoken weight. It had reached a point where the love I craved was no longer just a longing, but a gnawing hunger. When I first hired a sex worker, it started as a way to just feel the warmth of a woman. I wanted to feel like I was wanted and loved, even if it was a hollow performance. The first 2 times I hired a sex worker, it was just sex. It was nice and passionate at times, but it wasn't the sex I was missing. When I hired the sex worker the 3rd time, I made it clear I didn't want sex. I just wanted someone to hold and to hold me. It felt great, but it was still missing the emotional aspect, and that's when I came up with the idea for the flashcards. I hired the same sex worker every time. Gemma was considerably younger than me. She was the same age my wife was when we first met. Apart from age, the only other thing that resembled my wife was the color of her eyes. By our 4th encounter, Gemma knew what I was after, so when I pulled out the flashcards, she was happy to go along with it. You make me feel safe? Hold me tightly and don't let go. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I love you so much. Gemma was perfect. I didn't need to prompt her, and she knew exactly when to read the cards back to me. Her touch was warm and gentle, as if she could sense the weight of my loneliness, wrapping me in an embrace that felt both safe and electric. With each encounter, I felt more alive, as if she were breathing color back into my gray existence. My encounters with Gemma went from once a month to a couple nights a week. My need for love and validation became like a drug. I was hooked. The withdrawal was unbearable and left me feeling empty, like I had a dark void in my soul. There was a change in me that didn't go unnoticed by my wife. I started dressing differently. There was what you could call a pep in my step, especially around my wife. I won't lie. It started having a strange effect on my relationship with her. She was easier to be around, but I did suspect she knew something was up. The motel where Gemma and I met was a little more upmarket than the usual sleaziness and despair of a roadside motel. It wasn't 5 stars, but it did offer a certain discreetness. When the door opened, I was taken aback. Gemma stood before me, but it felt as if my wife had stepped into the room. She wore the same soft blue dress that my wife loved, its fabric hugging her figure just right, and her hair was styled in the same way, long and cascading with those effortless waves. Even her eyes seemed to shine with that familiar sparkle, making my heart race with a mix of longing and confusion. As she stepped inside, I noticed how she embodied my wife's mannerisms perfectly, the way she tilted her head when listening, the gentle laugh that danced from her lips, and the soft way she held her hands. It felt surreal, a haunting echo of my wife. My heart raced, torn between pleasure and a disquieting sense of unease. Was I still with Gemma, or had I somehow crossed a line into a disturbing fantasy? Gemma's uncanny resemblance to my wife sent a chill down my spine. The same blue dress, the exact haircut, and her mannerisms mirrored my wife's so perfectly that it felt like a cruel joke. "How did you know to dress like this?" I asked. She smiled, tilting her head just like my wife. "I thought she loved this dress." My heart raced as a knot twisted in my stomach. Was this a coincidence, or had she been watching us? I wasn't sure what to think, and I couldn't in good faith continue this charade. "I have to go," I said as I quickly left. That evening, a fragile tension hung in the air as my wife and I sat across from each other at the dining table. She glanced up, her blue eyes searching mine, and for the first time in ages, I felt a flicker of something I thought I had lost. "I've missed you," she said softly. "Really?" I replied. It was the first time in 10 years I heard even a hint of empathy from her mouth. She nodded as the tension in her shoulders slightly eased before she reached across the table and gently brushed my fingers. As we moved to the bedroom, an unfamiliar warmth washed over us as our barriers slowly crumbled. "Let's forget everything for a moment," she said. That night she gave me everything I had longed for in our relationship. For the first time I felt the affection I craved as we made passionate love. As we lay there in the sweaty aftermath of our lovemaking, I reveled in the closeness. But that was quickly shattered when my wife started echoing the same phrases from the flashcard I had Gemma recite. I lay there stunned, my heart pounding as her words echoed in the darkness. "You make me feel safe," she whispered. How could she know those exact words? My mind raced as I pulled away slightly, the intimacy suddenly replaced by a chilling unease. I shrugged off the previous night as a strange coincidence, convincing myself that I was overthinking things. My wife had simply said the right things at the right time, nothing more. The next evening I decided to sleep in the spare bedroom, seeking solitude. Sometime during the night I was jolted from my sleep as I felt a familiar warmth. Opening my eyes, I froze. Gemma was lying beside me. Her arms were wrapped around me in a tight embrace. A chilling feeling of dread crept up my spine as I looked around the room. All the flashcards I had made for our encounters were now nailed to the walls of the room. "You make me feel safe," she whispered, repeating each phrase like a ritual, her voice eerily soft. I couldn't handle it anymore. The flashcards, the strange way my wife had been acting, the eerie resemblance Gemma had started to take on, everything felt like it was closing in on me. I needed space. I needed to breathe. So, I went to the motel, the same place where I had met Gemma before, back when things were simpler, back when I thought I had some control over my life. I'd barely settled in when I heard a knock on the door. My heart stopped. I wasn't expecting anyone. Reluctantly, I opened it, and there she was, Gemma. But something was off. She looked exactly like my wife again, but this time there was no warmth. Her eyes were cold, just like the way my wife used to look at me when we argued. "You couldn't stay away, could you?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Gemma, why are you doing this?" She stepped inside, not waiting for an invitation. "Gemma? Is that what you call me now, you pathetic little man?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That's exactly how my wife used to talk to me in our worst moments. "You think paying for affection makes you a man? You think a few nice words on flashcards are enough to fix your sad, broken life?" she said in a cold, unrelenting tone. "Stop it," I said, shaking. She ignored me, walking further into the room. "You've always been weak. That's why she can't love you. You disgust her." "Shut up!" I shouted. "You're worthless. You were never enough for her. You'll never be enough for anyone," I snapped. The words, the look in her eyes, the way she embodied everything my wife had said and done to break me over the years, it was too much. I lunged at her, shoving her hard. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop. But she stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the coffee table. Her body crashed through the glass as I stood there, frozen in horror as she lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling around her. What have I done? I thought to myself. I rushed over to her, but she wasn't moving. The blood was everywhere, glistening under the motel lights. I didn't know what to do. My mind was spinning out of control. In a haze, I dragged her into the bathroom, laying her body in the tub. My hands were shaking as I wiped the sweat from my forehead. For a moment, I thought about walking away and leaving her for the cleaning staff to find. I couldn't think straight, couldn't focus. I needed help, so I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "There's been an accident. Someone's hurt." The police arrived quickly, faster than I expected. I led them to the bathroom, trying to calm my racing heart. I was shaking as I opened the door to show them the body, my mind already running through every possible scenario. But when I pulled back the shower curtain, there was no blood. Instead, lying in the tub, was a mannequin lying there with its glassy eyes staring up at me, its limbs twisted and stiff. My stomach dropped. Pinned to its chest and limbs were all the flashcards I had given Gemma. You make me feel safe. I love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. The officers stared at me, confused, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't explain it. The room spun as I sank to the floor, gasping for breath. Had I imagined everything, or had it all been part of some twisted game? As I slumped against the wall, catching my breath, my vision blurred with panic and exhaustion, I noticed one of the flashcards pinned to the mannequin wasn't like the others. The handwriting was different, sharper, and more deliberate. My stomach knotted as I read the words. Smile, I'm watching you, your loving wife. Ice ran through my veins. My gaze darted around the room. I hadn't noticed before, but tucked discreetly in the upper corners of the bathroom were tiny blinking red lights. Cameras. I rushed back into the main room, scanning it frantically. Sure enough, there were more. One behind the mirror, another disguised as part of the smoke alarm. I felt sick. She had been watching me here, in this very motel room. She had seen everything. Every intimate moment, every breakdown, every twisted encounter with Gemma. How long has this been going on? My chest pounded with fury and disbelief. I had to confront my wife. This thing that she'd orchestrated wasn't just about our marriage. It was something far, far darker. I drove to her work, my hands gripping the steering wheel. When I arrived at the university, I stormed into the building where she taught, not caring about the stares or whispers as I pushed my way toward the lecture hall. My heart pounded louder with each step. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't focus on anything except getting to her. I flung open the doors to her lecture room. The room was full of students, all women, and there, front and center, sitting with perfect posture, was Gemma. But she wasn't just any student. She was sitting at the front like a prized pupil, fully engrossed in what was happening on the projector screen. It took me a moment to register what I was seeing. On the screen were videos of me, of us, every humiliating, intimate moment of our marriage playing out on the screen. My heart sank as I saw flashes of our arguments, the loveless years, and then the nights I'd spent with Gemma. My wife stood at the front of the room, dressed impeccably as always, her cold eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She paused the video and turned to face me with a smile that sent chills down my spine. The entire class turned to stare at me as well. "Welcome, darling," she said. "I didn't expect you so soon, but it's a perfect time for a demonstration." "What is this?" I growled. She gestured to the screen casually, like she was explaining a case study. "This, my dear, is the culmination of years of work. A deep dive into the male psyche, specifically the fragile male ego and toxic masculinity." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only malice. "And you, my love, have been the perfect subject." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement from the students. Some took notes. Gemma's eyes locked onto mine, but they were no longer soft or inviting. They were cold, complicit in this twisted charade. "You set this all up? The cameras, the flashcards, Gemma?" My wife tilted her head, her smile widening. "Of course. Every part of your life, your marriage, your infidelity, I curated it all. I needed to break you down, to strip away every false layer of self-worth until only the truth remained. That's what this experiment was about. What better way to understand a man's breaking point than to use his own desires against him?" I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. "This is sick," I cried. I felt like I was going to collapse. Every intimate detail of my life had been exposed, dissected, and turned into a study. Every word, every flashcard, every moment of my desperation, it had all been for her amusement, for her research. The students were all watching, some amused, some intrigued, and others looking at me like I was nothing more than a pathetic creature beneath their feet. I couldn't breathe. My world as I knew it had shattered. My wife wasn't my partner. She had been my tormentor, my puppeteer, and I had danced right into her hands. Everything I thought I controlled had been orchestrated by her in the most cruel, calculated way. "You're a monster," I whispered, my voice trembling. My wife's smile widened. "Oh no, darling, I'm a scientist." This is how the human mind works. When you're walking through a forest, you don't think too much. You just let the silence surround you, feel the soft breeze and the branches crack under your feet. It's in our nature to yearn for such scenery. No matter how much we thrive in busy, concrete-soaked cities, forests are always welcoming and refreshing to us. The air is clear and crisp, and daylight plays hide and seek through the tall branches. It's inspiring and beautiful. Sometimes, though, as you walk on your path, your mind begins to focus on small things, noises, gusts of wind, shadows in the trees. Such silence can be both welcoming and unsettling, depends on how you view it. Forests are double-sided coins. They hide you away from the tiring city landscape, but expose you to another environment. You're not in control anymore because this is not your home. You can lie to yourself and build a house there, but you don't belong in a forest. You're merely a visitor. That's national parks for you. An illusion of being in control. The fake freedom you feel when you walk on those marked paths and camp in the square assigned to you, when you think the silence around you is peaceful, but even the silence is an illusion. Visit a forest again. Even when it's silent, is it really? It's not. Complete absolute silence means death. Fear it. My father taught me that. He's a park ranger, and he's been doing this job since forever. I wasn't much of a fan of national parks, especially because most of the time there's no service and the hikes are killing me. I'd rather enjoy nature by swimming in a lake or skiing. Why break your legs to end up to a high point just to see a random valley? Not to mention the animals. They were everywhere, and the insects always got on my nerves. I never understood his love for the forest. I guess that was one of the reasons why he started telling me scary stories from his night shift. Looking back, they were obviously made up, but to younger me they seemed believable. I used to think he was so brave for working the night shift. As I got older, I got into horror, and even if I didn't believe in his forest creatures anymore, I still liked the idea of spending the night in a small cabin in the middle of nowhere, just for that dose of adrenaline. When my father said he wanted to take me with him, I accepted immediately. I knew why he offered. See, over the past years, our relationship had taken a big hit. I guess I was growing up and he didn't know how to handle that. He'd become emotionally distant and seemed to repel any of my tries to open up to him. In return, I'd become uninterested and irritable. In the words of my mother, this would have been a fun way to bond, I guess. We arrived at the park around 9 p.m. His shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. His Jeep pierced through the darkness and ventured into the woods. The headlights flashed the trees, turning them white against the black sky. I'd never been on this route, but, again, my visits to the park were rare. We drove for a while. Most of the time, people underestimate the size of national parks. It took us an hour and a half to get to the cabin, which wasn't even in the heart of the forest. I saw it, one single trace of humanity in the middle of nowhere, a tiny wooden cabin with flickering light bulbs and watchdogs. Before we got out of the car, my father stopped me. "Listen, there's some instructions you need to follow here. I know it might seem unimportant, but they're crucial." Then he handed me a piece of paper, a list of handwritten rules. At first they were ordinary. Don't go out alone in the park, don't leave food out, etc. I thought the rest of the rules had been put there just to freak me out. "Dad, I'm not 12 anymore. You can't freak me out with this shit." "I'm not trying to. You wanted to come here with me, so act accordingly." "What even is this? If you see a man without an arm, don't help him?" We have all kinds of weirdos around here. "And this? If the whistling is near you, it means they're far?" My father smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Some of these are added by superstitious fellas. It's more of a what if. It's not going to happen to you. 1. Don't go out alone in the park. Always have a working contact device. 2. Don't leave marked paths, unless instructed to and or with proper equipment. 3. Don't leave food out and lock the trash bins. 4. Always keep on the whistle and the badge. 5. If you see a man without an arm, don't help him. 6. Your family is not in here. Remember, There is no reason for you to hear their voices from outside. 7. Lock your car doors even when you are driving. 8. Check the marks on the trees. There's only 3 types of marks, all triangles: red, yellow, and green. Other marks are not ours. Don't follow them. 9. If the whistling is near you, it means they're far. If it's far away, it means they're near. 10. Beware of dead blue. What is dead blue? I asked. My father sighed. You know when you're out in the woods? When you think what you hear is silence, but you realize there's dozens of sounds around you, from birds to crickets to leaves rustling. Yeah, that's because there's no such thing as silence. Absolute silence. Never. There's always sound, movement, life. Dead blue is complete and utter silence. That's our, code name for it. Death-inducing silence. Unnatural. Right, and when that happens, it won't. But if it does? He paused, staring at the steering wheel. Then his head turned to me. His eyes darted from mine to the window behind me. You leave. That being said, he got out of the car and I followed. The cabin was dusty and cramped. I couldn't understand how he could spend 8 hours in here. He had a small TV, but it wasn't working, a desk, and a mini fridge. You sit here all alone? I asked. Yeah, why, that freak you out? Don't you get bored? Martin's post is 10 minutes away. Sometimes I just drive over. Nothing really happens out here anyway. My spot is pretty far from the campsites. I just have to put time to make sure no one wanders off into the night, but that rarely happens. This is one of the wilder areas, less explored. You haven't explored it all? His eyes sparkled. Wouldn't be possible. So you don't know what's out there? That's the fun of it. You said you wanted adrenaline. There you go. I nodded. He opened the mini fridge and threw me some juice. Orange juice. I'd mentioned I liked this brand once, and he'd remembered. Maybe our relationship wasn't so bad. We sat next to each other in the small cabin. Dad locked it. I'm not going to lie to you. Most of the time I just sleep. Literally nothing ever happens. So you really didn't see any creatures out there like the ones you told me about when I was little? I jokingly asked. The only creature out there is my manager, and I'd rather face a million cryptids than talk to him. I laughed. I leaned in to look out the windows. I can't see anything, just my reflection. Want me to dim down the light? Yeah. He did, and darkness crept inside the tiny cabin. The woods became more prominent, more vivid. The light made by the moon was unbelievable, and the stars were actually visible compared to the polluted city. The cabin was on a hill, propped up a tree, with a trap door and a ladder leading to our car. We could actually see above the tree line, into the valley. We spent the first hours talking. Somewhere around midnight I began dozing off. I didn't want to, but I caved in and fell asleep with my head on the desk. He woke me up. I rubbed my eyes in confusion. What time is it? I got a call from Martin. Right, who? Was Martin? I mumbled. The other one in the area. He says he got a call from the campsite and someone's missing. We need to go search for him. We? As in us? Yeah, you'll stay in the back seat. I'm on the phone with Martin right now. I could hear Martin's muffled voice through the speaker. Wait, don't take the kid. Why not? He'll stay in the car. Paul, it could be one of those nights. We won't get out of the car. You can't guarantee that. Well, I can't leave him here, alone, in the dark. A pause followed. Look, Paul, I understand you wanted to do a take-your-kid-to-work day, but I don't know about this one. It could be dangerous. We're literally just going to drive around for a bit. It's fine. Leave him in the cabin. Dad put his hand over one of the speakers, so I didn't understand what Martin told him. His eyes kept darting to the window behind me. He sighed. Martin will come pick me up. You are staying here, locked. Turn the lights off and wait for me to return. It's going to take a minute and you'll be safe here. What? I'm not staying here alone. What did Martin tell you to change your mind? It doesn't matter. I'll return in maximum half an hour. You can go back to sleep if you want, or I can call you and we can talk. I was afraid, truly afraid. I did not want to show it, especially after I'd complained that nothing interesting happened around there, so I reluctantly agreed. My dad opened the trap door and climbed down the ladder. Then his face disappeared into the darkness. I saw Martin's car pick him up and drive away. Silence followed. I wished I'd been home, in my bed. Instead, I sat stiff on the chair and waited, and waited. I began imagining the worst. What if they'd crashed? What if a bear had found them? I didn't want to let my fear get the best of me, but I thought about his legends and the set of rules. I hoped the writers were just paranoid. At around 2 a.m., I heard a knock on the trap door. I felt my chest tighten. Another knock followed. I wanted to respond, but something in me didn't allow me to. Then I heard my dad's voice. "Kev, open, it's cold out here." It echoed through the cabin. My eyes were dry from the lack of sleep, but my mind was fully awake. I stared at the phone, then at the trap door. "Kev, open, please. I know you're there. I saw you at the window." I turned off the light completely. I don't know why I had this urge, but if my dad could see me from the window, anyone could. Or anything. And I didn't like to be on display like that. "You don't have a key? It locks from the inside." "Shit, yeah. How was it? Did you find him?" "Yeah, we did. He was drunk off his ass. We helped him return to his friends. Could have been a lot worse." As I was talking to him, I searched for the keys in the drawer. It was strange because I hadn't heard anyone climbing the ladder or seen Martin's car drive my dad back to the cabin. "How did you get here without Martin?" "What do you mean? Open up, Kev. I'm freezing." "Answer the question." "He did drive me here. Didn't see any headlights?" "They were off to not draw the attention of animals." "Bullshit." I pulled out the crumpled piece of paper. 6. Your family is not in here. Remember, there is no reason for you to hear their voices from outside. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely grab the phone. I skimmed through my contacts. Kate F. Connor. Dad. I called him. The phone was ringing, yet no sound came from beneath the trap door. My dad picked up. "Anything okay?" In the blinding darkness of the cabin, surrounded by the howling wind, I toned my voice down to a whisper. "Dad, someone out there is pretending to be you." A long pause followed. When he spoke, his voice was trembling. "Don't open. Turn off the lights. Did you turn them off when I told you?" I turned them off now." "No, you should have turned them off when I left." "I'm sorry." "It's fine. Don't talk to it. Did you talk to it?" Guilt crept up my spine. I don't know why, but I lied. "I did not." "Good. Stay put. I'm coming after you." "But what if the thing sees you? You'll have to face it." "We have ways to distract them. It's fine. Don't be scared." I lied again. "I'm not." "Good. I love you. I'm coming." I wasn't scared for me. I was scared for him. The voice from below continued. "Kev, please open, please. It's cold." I didn't answer. Knocks followed. The voice went on. "Did you talk to someone on the phone?" "Kev, I lost my phone in the woods. Whoever is out there and has my phone is not me. It's not me. It's not me." It kept repeating. "It's not me. It's not me." I began feeling lightheaded. Fear is one thing, but this was a combination of anxiety, stress, and guilt. I tried to control my breaths, but to no avail. The cabin was spinning around me. "It's not me. It's 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 not me." "Aaron, shut up, shut up." And it did. Silence followed. I pulled out the list again and started reading and rereading the rules, like a lunatic. I kept listening for noises from outside. The wind was still going. Good. No dead blue. Then I heard a loud thud from my wall. Another followed and another. It sounded like footsteps. They moved to the roof of the cabin. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Whatever was out there was now climbing around my cabin. I could hear the scratching outside. I started to cry and covered my mouth with my hand. I just wanted my dad. I wished I could see his face again. The universe somehow ironically responded because my dad's face suddenly appeared at one of the windows. He raised his hand and knocked. I stared at him through my eyebrows, my head tilted. Scarcely breathing, I remained still. He kept knocking. That wasn't my dad. The cabin was tied to a tree at around 10 meters from the ground. He could not be at the window. The creature knocked, and for what seemed like an eternity, we just made eye contact. Blood was dripping from one of its nostrils. Another phone call woke me from my trance. "Kevin, are you there? Are you in the cabin?" "Yes, and the thing looks like you, and it's at the window." I'm coming right now. I'll shoot it. Don't worry. I'm just about to turn a corner. Dad, I'm really scared for you. Martin's coming too. It's okay. Truly, in a few minutes, Martin's car pulled up. I cried in relief. The thing turned its head to look, then back to me. It opened its mouth wide, and using its fingers, pulled the corners upwards to form a smile, then jumped into the woods, into the darkness. Gunshots followed. After a few silent minutes, I called my dad. He picked up. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm coming to get you." I saw him walk towards the cabin, then heard him climb up the stairs. I unlocked the trap door and hugged him tight. "What was that? Please tell me we're going home." "We are. I'm so sorry. I should have never put you through this. Come on." As we walked towards our car, my blood ran cold. It was not something I'd seen or heard, but the opposite. See, the wind had stopped. The crickets had stopped. Dead blue. I sprinted to the car, got into the driver's seat, then locked the doors. My dad was standing in front of the car, confused. That's when I got a text, and I hit the gas. I ran him over, then turned the car around and sped up into the night. I barely knew how to work it out since I didn't have my license, but I left as quick as possible. Behind me, a car followed. When I got to the nearest checkpoint, I stopped. The car was Martin's. He got out alone. "Where's my dad?" I asked. "He took an ATV to get you. Said he'd get there faster. I texted him to turn around and that you were safe." The text he'd sent me. Martin and I split up. He may get there faster than me, and if he does, he'll text me to turn and head to the checkpoint. There is no one with Martin. He's alone. I thought I'd unlocked the trap door to my dad when he'd actually taken an ATV and turned to the checkpoint. The thing I'd ran over wasn't my dad, and I'd known it since I felt that unnerving silence. However, no one at the checkpoint had seen my father. As I'm typing this, I'm afraid for him, but a part of me knows he's alive. Maybe he took another route or got lost. Whatever he did, I'll find him. https www.reddit.com nosleep comments 14H8X. My father is a park ranger. He took me with him on.